time will end on time, and people will hopefully keep joining. Good morning, Jeff. Good to see you. Thank you for joining us. Many of you know who I am. I'm Carla Ludholtz. I'm the Director of Donor Services at the Community Foundation here in Wausau. And I really want to start by saying thank you. Thank you to each one of you for taking the time to join us this morning and hopefully walk away with some wonderful information. I would say that, the Community Foundation is really proud to be able to provide something like this. We feel that we're providing some very exciting and informative information for all of you today, as well as information for our community as a whole. And that is thanks to many of our staff, as well as our good friends at the Wisconsin Philanthropy Network. I will tell you that during the presentation today, please feel free to put comments in the chat box if you'd like. We'll be capturing those. And we have also allotted for some time at the end for questions and answers. So we want to make sure that we get those answered. And many times those questions you may ask, somebody else may be thinking it as well. So please use the chat box, and also know you'll have some time at the end as well for that. So with that, what I'd like to be able to do is, it's my pleasure to be able to welcome and introduce our President and CEO, Mr. Tim Parker, from the Community Foundation. So Tim, I'll turn it to you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending this call today. I'd like to welcome our valued donors, advisors, key stakeholders, and community members to this presentation today. The 2020 Wisconsin Gives Report, called Philanthropy Rising, Responding to Pressing Challenges and Reimagining Futures, is a report that provides critical information about statewide charitable giving, national trends, and sector-specific analysis, which is vital to informing and advancing effective philanthropy. The Wisconsin Philanthropy Network is a professional membership association for grant makers from across the state. As Wisconsin's premier resource in philanthropy, WPN is committed to making giving as effective and meaningful as possible by providing networking opportunities, skill building, and customized research services, in which we will be benefiting from today. We're joined by Tony Shields, President and CEO of the WPN, along with Michelle St. Clair, Director of Membership and Resource Development, who will be presenting their research from the 2020 Give Report. Welcome, Tony and Michelle.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Tim. Appreciate it. Also, thanks to Carla and Jenna for helping us to get organized today around developing this presentation to you, all of you, and all of your stakeholders. We had the opportunity when we did the 2018 Wisconsin Gives Report to present to the Community Foundation of North Central Wisconsin. As part of that, we came up, did a live presentation, I think was our first roadshow to support the Gives Report. And so when we developed this 2020 Gives Report, we were just super excited to be able to collaborate with the Community Foundation on this opportunity to present the 2020 Gives Report to you. So thank you for the opportunity and the honor to speak with all of you today. We really appreciate this opportunity to do so. Tim talked about it on the next slide, gave a great update on who WPN is, what we do and what we're trying to do to promote effective philanthropy in Wisconsin through our work. A couple of other things that I would add to this is that we are a membership organization of about 120 grant makers and philanthropic interests throughout the state of Wisconsin. We have community foundations, corporate foundations, family foundations, health funders, and education funders that are part of our membership. We also have some statewide grantors, but organizations that are doing grant making. Our members contribute annually about $600 million in grants, to both in their own cities, in their own regions, potentially throughout the state, nationally, and also we have a few international funders that are part of our work. Our real strategic focus of the organization, we undertook a strategic planning process in 2018 And really, our ultimate goal beyond promoting effective philanthropy in Wisconsin is to promote a culture of philanthropy, to help everyone within the state understand that they are in some way, in one shape or form, a philanthropist because they're looking at problem solving and they're figuring out how to source the solutions to those problems. Our goal is also to develop dynamic programs and provide spaces for philanthropic discussions. We also develop products like the Wisconsin Gives Report. We also have a statewide conference on philanthropy that we do every other year. Our conference this year will be in the fall of 2021. You are all welcome to come as part of your relationship with the Community Foundation. We will be sending out information about the statewide conference as we go forward. And really, our goal is to just share best practice, both nationally and statewide. We have a lot of great thought leaders that are in Wisconsin, but we also recognize that there is a deeper national focus on work that we're doing. I'm proud to say that in Wisconsin, we are really aligned with many of the national benchmarks that we see. So we are doing some great work in Wisconsin within the space of the work that we're doing. The next slide talks about the Gives Report itself, and really speaks to the overall commitment to providing valuable information to stakeholders about the philanthropic sector. We share this report with all of our members and make it available to the public as a free PDF and can be downloaded from our website. This year's report explores the important role philanthropy plays in responding to challenges. It includes results from WPN's statewide grantmaker survey conducted in the summer of 2020, data from studies including Giving USA, Foundation Information Center, GuideStar, Community Foundation Insights, Chief Executives for Corporate Purpose, the National Philanthropic Trust, CAF America, and more. It also includes the 2020 Helen Bader Institute for Nonprofit Management findings on COVID-19 and their effect on Wisconsin's nonprofit sector, and contributing articles and spotlights showcasing best practices. Through all of this data gathering that we pulled together for this report, we have over 5,000 entities that have influenced in some way the information that you would see on the Wisconsin Gives Report, both in this presentation and if you visit us online. I also want to acknowledge our team, the WPN team. Michelle, who was on this call today, helped bring the Gives Report to narrative life, to the human touch side of life. Also, Amanda Buckley, who is our Director of Programs and Research, led our efforts to develop the content and the data. And Terry Blair from our team helped design our Gives Report and all the information that is there. The next slide talks about key findings of the report. Total charitable giving in the United States rose 4.2% between 2018 and 2019 to almost $450 billion estimated. Nationally, giving by corporations increased 13.4% to just a little over $21 billion. Nearly half of WPN survey respondents expect to increase their grant making in 2020. 64% of WPN survey respondents who are increasing grants are directing their funding to disaster philanthropy due to COVID-19 crisis. 39% of WPN survey respondents will increase grants. 60% are directing funding to address racial equity issues. Our report includes information from the prior year as it has in the past. 2020 has been an unprecedented year, obviously, with many uncertainties. So this data provides insight into Wisconsin's philanthropic sector for the year of 2020. I also want to remind you that the digital report for the Wisconsin Gives contains links for deeper dives in subject matters. So if you visit the report on our website, you will also see your ability to go into links that talk about the data that we use, but goes into a deeper dive of much of that data. So if you are a person who gets excited about the anatomy of data, there's a lot of great information that is contained in our online version of the site. I say all this to say that it's pretty good news relative to approaching 2020 and what was happening in 2020. Philanthropy continues to rise to the challenges, be present, and increase giving as we go forward. The next slide talks about our grant maker survey, and just a little quick backgrounder on our grant maker survey. 365 grant makers across Wisconsin were asked to participate in the survey, about 20% with a 20% response rate. Respondents represent a variety of different types of grant makers. The majority were corporate foundations and giving programs, as well as community foundations. In 2020, most of the respondents focused on Southeast Wisconsin, Southwest Wisconsin, but that also does look at a larger swatch of the state overall. This slide looks at expected change in assets for 2019. Looks at 31% of grant makers expect assets to increase in 2020. And again, this survey was taken midsummer into early fall. So 31% of the grant makers at that time were increasing their giving from 2020 to 2019. 37% of grant makers expect assets to stay about the same. 32% of grant makers expect assets to decrease in 2020 compared to 2019. These numbers are also impacted by COVID, obviously, and the overall financial stability across the country. When improvements to the economy happen, we should expect that positive changes will also come to those assets. The next slide looks at grant making for 2020. So this goes directly to the contributions that were being made by philanthropy, the sourcing that was being made by philanthropy. Good news here again. It's estimated that grant making is up in high giving categories. In 2020, 39% of grant makers will invest $1 million to just under $5 million in Wisconsin communities. And this is up 35% from 2018. In 2018. In 2020, 11% of grant makers will invest $5 million to just under $10 million, and this is up 9%. And in 2020, 8% of grant makers will invest $20 million or more, and this is up 5% in 2018. The next slide looks at estimated change in grant making from 2019. Again, more great news. It is nearly half of the grant makers who are surveyed expect to increase grant making in 2020, despite the less optimistic change in assets. This is due in some part to the foundations developing sustainability strategies for grantees while being responsive to the realities of COVID and racial justice awareness. The next slide will illustrate that a little bit deeper. This is reasons for increased grant making this year. Nearly 3/4 of grant makers who are increasing grants this year are doing so because of increased needs due to current conditions, including the pandemic and its economic ripple effects, as well as racial justice issues. So there's a responsiveness mindset among a number of funders throughout the state that we found as we did our survey throughout the report. The next slide looks at responding to changing practices. This year or last year, the Wisconsin grant makers are also reporting greater flexibility to respond to current conditions, including temporary changes and considering other changes in the future. The most common changes to grant-making practices include allowing grants of current grantees to shift, providing flexible reporting requirements, converting restricted grants to unrestricted, increasing the size of current grants or providing supplemental grants, and accelerating payment schedules. This goes directly to the nimbleness of philanthropy during the challenging times. When you look at the role of community foundations and the role of that work that was happening in that particular environment and their level of responsiveness to the pandemic and racial justice that were happening in communities, it really was, in many communities, the community foundations that were leading the key efforts that were happening. They were developing the COVID relief funds. They were mobilizing and partnering with the United Way organizations throughout the state. And philanthropy, even within the non-financial pieces of the work, were also developing communication streams with their grantees, letting them know that they are there and they want to hear their stories. They want to hear what's happening on the ground, communicating the fact that they are working that they want to work collaboratively with them, and adopting more trust-based processes within their work. And philanthropy did that, and it was inspiring for all of us as we were looking at the reaction and the needs that were happening within our community. So grant makers really responded to the various changes that were happening within our communities. The next slide looks at your concerns about Wisconsin nonprofit sector. And this survey really looked at, in this particular question, we asked a number of our survey respondents to just talk about the overall nonprofit sector, what your perception is about what is happening overall from a sustainability issue and all the things that can happen for nonprofits within the space. And Grantmakers reported that the concerns about Wisconsin's nonprofit sector in 2020 included nearly all were very concerned to moderately concerned about the increased demand for services experienced by nonprofits. The vast majority were also concerned or very concerned about decreases in private funding, decreases in public funding, and reduced government funding. So again, this is larger sector-based conversations that we were having. Think about it in the context of when government funding decreases or public funding decreases, often philanthropy is asked to fill those gaps. And so as there are increasing sustainability issues that are happening for nonprofit organizations, philanthropy will continue to be asked and drawn back on from an overall nonprofit sector. The next slide goes directly to impact on grantee partners. So this is asking grant makers about their specific relationships with their individual grantees. The vast majority of grant makers believe that their grantee partners have been impacted by COVID-19. The other category included a variety of comments about COVID impact across grantees, sectors, and geographies. The hardship of grantees relying on ticket sales or fundraising events was recognized. The resilience of grantees pivoting to digital services was also noted. There's also continuing conversation around sustainability models, when funding should go into nonprofit organizations, and again, really looks at the nimbleness and the importance of nimbleness of philanthropy when they're dealing specifically with their individual grantee organization. The next slide looks at COVID-19 survey respondents' investments. So we asked philanthropy specific questions related to COVID. In 2020, grant makers made investments in grants to respond to COVID-19 pandemic. 75% invested in food security, 59% invested in education, 57% invested in housing and homelessness, and other investments included a variety of grants such as those to support nonprofits, antibody testing, legal aid, students, and more. We also asked our survey respondents to talk to us about racial justice and the conversations around that. And grantmaker respondents reported specifically making investments to respond to racial justice. 28% directed increased support to organizations serving people of color, and 25% directed increased support to organizations which are led by people of color. Also looking at building capacity for leaders, looking at strategies to develop the capacity of frontline staff. So there continues to be a number of various ways that funders are going into nonprofit organizations to support their work as they are going forward. This is an area we recommend, though, that you continue to track. Both COVID-19 and racial justice are very fluid. When we did the survey in 2020, we recognized that we didn't know a lot of what we know today. And so we are continuing to track respondents and information from our members around how they're responding to COVID, how they're responding to racial equity issues in communities. And so post-survey conversations are continuing to happen. We also suggest increased momentum, that we anticipate that there is increased momentum in this area. And we'll be polling our members in this winter, we'll be polling our members on social justice and phase 2 COVID questions in those particular areas. The next slide looks at public health giving in Wisconsin. This is an important slide because this is something that really looks at the kind of the statewide impact. And pre-COVID, we were engaged in conversations with our members around the impact of health funding and what that potentially looks like. Now, the caveat to that is that obviously we're having a lot of discussions right now about vaccinations and access to health and access to health care, disparities in health care, and all that is part of the overall health-related conversation. But we were also engaging in a deeper conversation with our members relative to health and health funding. And what we were looking at were the key social determinants of health. So we were continuing to deepen those conversations with our members about their important role in seeing themselves as health-related funders and asking themselves the question, if you support education, workforce development, food insecurity, mental health, housing and homelessness, you're contributing to the overall basic health of your community. And therefore, you are, in theory, a health funder, because when you look at those other issues, you are funding the health and vitality of your community. And this slide really looks at Wisconsin Gives as we share the information about public health grant making and disaster philanthropy. And an example of this is information that was shared about the Advancing Healthy Wisconsin Endowment and Wisconsin Partnership Program, which together have invested more than $527 million to health research, education, and community grants, reaching all 72 counties across Wisconsin. So this slide is really a dual. It really is a message around us all being health funders, but then also looks at the impact of two very dedicated funds that are investing in health-related granting throughout the state of Wisconsin. Areas for partnership, areas for additional conversation as we go forward are looking at those particular spaces. The next slide looks at Wisconsin nonprofit sector. It looks at the number of Wisconsin nonprofits. Data from GuideStar and the Bureau of Labor Statistics shows the economic importance of Wisconsin's nonprofit sector. There are nearly 60,000 Wisconsin nonprofit organizations, including public charities and non-government organizations, as well as private foundations. Wisconsin's nonprofits accounted for more than 1 in 10 jobs without the state, 1 in 10 jobs in the state of Wisconsin. I think this is an important slide because beyond the number of nonprofits that this slide talks about, this is also a workforce development slide. We've got 12% of Wisconsin's workforce is working in the nonprofit sector. When something like COVID comes around and it affects nonprofit organizations and their sustainability, this affects jobs, it affects employment, it affects workforce development. And so while this is a great slide to illustrate the volume of nonprofits that are happening in communities, I would encourage anyone who's looking at this slide to also look at it from the context of workforce development and how nonprofit organizations are a major workforce within the scale of organizations that are providing employment for people throughout the state of Wisconsin. The next slide is the total foundation of Wisconsin, Wisconsin Giving Statistics. Data from the Foundation Information Center shows the scale of foundations in Wisconsin. There are more than almost 1,800, with the majority in the southeastern Wisconsin and southwest Wisconsin. Their total assets are about $12 billion. Total giving, $874 million. This is an increase from 2018. What's really interesting about this slide, what we find interesting about this slide at WPN, is while that number of foundations in Wisconsin is very daunting, rising to about 1,800, this does include donor-advised funds. It includes dormant foundations. It includes small-scale foundations. It includes organizations that are labeling themselves as foundations but aren't necessarily giving out to the volume that some of the other foundations are giving. When you look at WPN's 120 members, for example, we compared to the overall giving of these 1,800, this $874 million that are being given out, our 120 members as part of WPN give out around $600 million of that. So by virtue of your relationship with the Community Foundation, you are at the table and at the seat for discussion with some of the larger and most prominent giving foundations throughout the state of Wisconsin. That's not to say that we don't have small-scale individuals that are participating in our work, not to say that we don't have people that are leading and heading donor-advised funds that are part of the membership of the organization, but it does provide some context to that very large number of from a giving standpoint annually from year to year. The next slide looks at donor-advised funds. And the National Philanthropic Trust 2019 Donor Advised Fund Report finds that grants from donor-advised funds continue to increase. And this is from $12.35 billion in 2014 to $23.42 billion in 2018. One of the things, though, that's come out of this, and we've done a number of these presentations, the GIVES report presentations, in particular to community foundations around the state. And one of the things that we want to continue to stress as we're engaging in these conversations with those people who are interested in philanthropy, but are also aligned with and heavy participators in community foundations in your community, is that there's a great level of opportunity here for donor-advised funds from the standpoint of nimbleness. So if you look at the overall budgets that the community foundation may have, it's pretty stagnant in many cases, that and doesn't allow for a great deal of flexibility in terms of the granting and the type of granting that they're doing. But the donor-advised funds do have the ability to be a little bit more reactive, do have the ability to step up in moments of uncertainty within communities. The COVID-19 crisis is a very good example of that. And so what I would encourage you all to continue to think about is how you're looking at your donor-advised funds and how you're thinking about your funding opportunities that are out there, and think about your ability to be nimble, your ability to react, your ability to be innovative within the spaces that you're working as you're thinking about the work that is happening within your communities. The next slide looks at specifically community foundations. The Community Foundation Research and Training Institute's national study found that community foundations were responding across the United States with grants from donor-advised funds at about 72% and new COVID-19 funds. This is similar in Wisconsin, which saw many new COVID-19 funds being created at community foundations, often in partnerships with private foundations or corporate foundations, as well as United Ways. Community foundations, and the headline for this particular slide is that community foundations led the effort to partner and respond to COVID-19. They were really a philanthropic benchmark for a lot of the work that is happening within the areas of COVID within that work. The GIVES report also shares a number of other areas that we didn't dive into today, like information giving on national trends around family foundations, around corporate giving, and then looks specifically at sector giving, like the arts, mental health, veterans affairs, those types of things. So we would encourage you to continue to take a look at the report itself to help you give you some deeper context around overall giving within the state. But we really wanted to focus our conversation today on community foundations and donor-advised funds. And so there's a quote here from one of our respondents talking about the power of philanthropy within the work, and that philanthropy is stepping up and doing more, giving more and empowering more in this period. This is an opportunity for philanthropy to respond, to do the right thing, the right way, learn from what works, and continue with the changes that make sense. This should result in a cultural alliances between funders and grantees as they understand one another better and relax the power dynamics as we go forward. Also want to thank our sponsors who helped to source the GIVES report. Our major sponsors were the Mathematics Institute of Wisconsin, as well as the Community Foundation of the Fox Valley region. We also have other funders who we are also very grateful to. They include Northwestern Mutual, Rockwell Automation, Alliant Energy Foundation, Madison Community Foundation, Racine Community Foundation, the Community Foundation of the North Central Wisconsin, Greater Green Bay Community Foundation, Association for Fundraising Professionals, Foley and Laudner, Helen Bader Institute, as well as the Association for Fundraising Professionals in both Dane County and in southeastern Wisconsin. Again, we're very, very proud of this report. We're very proud of the information that is contained in it, and we're always, always excited to share information with you. We are currently working on a roadshow. We are currently in the throes of that, if you think that there is someone who might benefit from this information, might benefit from this presentation and the subsequent conversation that we'll have at the conclusion of the actual presentation itself, please let us know. We're happy to disseminate this information, and it's part of our overall strategy to thank our supporters, thank the work that has gone into this. So let us know if there is a venue that you think would be appropriate for us to share this information with. And with that, happy to take any questions that you might have, any comments, reaction. What I would advise, though, is that if we do not know the answer to a particular question, please give us a day or two, seek out that answer to that question, and then we will return those answers to Tim and the team to disseminate to you as we go forward. But with that said, Michelle, we can take off the PowerPoint and go back to the face-on-face touch of the conversation, and we're happy to answer any questions that you might have at this time.
So Tony, I just would comment for just a moment. First of all, I think that for anybody who's on this call right now, a ton of information that you've provided here, as well as anyone who registered for this, there was a link so you can look at this online for the publication, or if you would like a hard copy of that, we have that as well. So please, as I put in the chat box, reach out. We're happy to get that in your hands. Again, the group that's on this call is very diverse. We have a wide variety of people joining today. We're really happy about that. So we want to keep providing some additional tools. And I want to say thank you, because as you've touched on some of the things and the support of the importance of community foundations, but also the importance and the flexibility of those donor advised funds, many people who are on the call today were instrumental in that. And we would be remiss if we weren't saying thank you to anyone who played a role in that, because we were really able to put our arms around this community and care for them. And that would not happen without the support of such generous and compassionate donors and people of the community providing the services. So I want to be able to say that as well.
Yeah, Carla, I think, as we sit with community foundations and engage in these conversations, for us, from our perspective, that's the headline. The headline is, thank you to the donor advised funds for how you reacted to the things that were happening in your community as it related to all of these things that came up that we didn't expect. The nimbleness of philanthropy led by many community foundations is unparalleled, and it's great work that's out there. And I share your appreciation for philanthropy's response. Mm-hmm. And most notably, community foundations leading efforts within various communities throughout the state to help leverage the energy and the flexibility of those donor advised funds. So I completely share that sentiment with you.
Yeah. Great. As we're kind of looking at the faces there, what questions do folks have, as long as we have quite an audience, Tony, Michelle, as well as staff on here from our team, as well as United Way, what questions that you may want to pose to the group here today? No? There's got to be a couple. Let me ask this question to the group then to kind of prompt it. As you think about this and as we're presenting some of the things today, and you think about maybe the power of foundations and how we respond to emergencies in communities, what types of things maybe are you looking for from us to maybe be at the table and helping with? Are there other things that you're thinking about as an organization that you really believe, boy, the Community Foundation should be leading the way on something like this, being at the table? Are there ideas on that?
Well, I would, in prompting that discussion point, one of the things that I would implore a community foundation working on behalf of their donor advised funds, and even the donor advised funds themselves, the people who hold those funds, don't underestimate the influence that a community foundation has within a community. Don't underestimate the brand of the community foundation as you're coming to table. Now, there's a balance, right, between that whole conversation about being at the table and being a participant in that table and being looked to as the leader of that table. And what I would implore a community foundation and those that are working on behalf of community foundations to do is that when you're coming to those tables, understand your ability to mobilize, understand your ability to react with resources, but also work within a level of humility and consider trust-based approaches in how you're engaging in those conversations. And then also leverage that flexibility. Do what you did in 2020 and continue to be nimble, continue to work within that flexibility. And as you're at the table, coming up with that opportunity mindset, coming up with that, with that mindset of developing strategies that you can react to and support immediately the work that is happening, the conversations that are taking place, the opportunities that are there within inside those conversations.
I think, I'm looking over to you, Jeff, as well. I think that one of the things that we received a lot of feedback, and I know that we have utilized the entire COVID-19 fund, and now we're trying to move forward. But I think there was a lot of feedback and comments from the community and from individuals and leaders saying they really did like the fact that there was the ability to move quickly and kind of pivot and also unite when it was something of that magnitude with COVID. So I do want to be able to say thank you because we have a number of friends that are on this call from United Way, and many of our donors and folks that are out there are very involved in both. So I'd be remiss if I didn't say thank you to them as well. But Jeff, I would look to you and see if there were any comments you may have, because as we move forward with this now, and we're looking at other issues, thoughts or comments that you might have as you're taking in this information and how we would be moving forward.
Hopefully you can hear me.
We can. Mm-hmm.
Not on my phone. I would echo everything that Tony said.
Jeff, you're kind of going out. Can't hear you.
That's the problem. I
Stay real close to the screen, then we can hear you.
yeah, right. Yeah, maybe spotlight me too.
Yeah.
I'll just echo what Tony said about the strength of community foundations in Wisconsin. Certainly, the fact that community foundations are at the table and are part of those conversations certainly shows the power of a community coming together. And I think certainly here in central Wisconsin and Marathon County, a lot of the work that was done in terms of raising additional COVID-19 response funds would not have been possible without the community foundation. There's just different levels of donor. I think the key for all of us is to figure out how do we tap into different groups in our communities that care about certain things. Because that's how I think we all know how you raise money to do good, is that people need to care about it and they need to see that the community is coming together for something good. And so certainly that's what we like to see at United Way, and I know many of the other partners on here as well. Our community steps up for each other, we can accomplish so much more versus just us trying to do it alone.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Jeff. I know one of the things I was thinking about as we were listening to the presentation was on the grant side of things. And I'm just wondering, Sue, I'm thinking about you out there. Thoughts from you as far as something you may have as you were listening to this presentation because of the role you play and how you work so closely on the other side of this.
Sure. Thank you, Carla. I actually have a question. And Jeff, I really appreciate the comments that you made. The Community Foundation and the United Way working together is a really strong force in this community. And I think that really came through with the COVID relief response that we were able to take care of in the community this year. But I do have a question for you, Tony. Do you see from the findings that you have from the report, are there any actionable items? Is there something that we should be jumping on quite quickly as a community foundation, as a United Way, as a community in general? Is there anything that would really be some action items right now?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. We're trying to be a little bit more actionable in our work that we are having with our organization. What I would encourage from an action perspective is to think about one of the things that we're hearing from the nonprofit sector and the conversations that we're having, and even one of the things that we're hearing about from other foundations throughout the state, is the need for tools. Transitioning from these conversations that are really rooted in awareness and move away from the awareness piece of it, because people are aware. You know, this sector is flush with people that are coming in, with people with great hearts that have an understanding of the issues that are happening in communities. And what I would say from an action perspective is really take a look at moving from this awareness side and move more into the analysis side, working harder at not necessarily looking at an issue that's happening in the community, but asking the conversation about why that issue is happening in the community. And as you're developing your understanding around why it's happening, the analytics around it, then begin to develop the actionable steps that would go into addressing that why. And then looking at your work from an allyship perspective. One of the issues and most actionable pieces that are also happening right now is this whole idea around the sustainability of the nonprofit sector due to the issues that are happening with COVID. Many nonprofit organizations that applied for PPP protection in 2020 may not be eligible for PPP in 2021 because there's certain benchmarks that there's certain loss benchmarks that you would need to fulfill that you would need to have happen to you and happen to an organization in 2020 that you may not reach those benchmarks in 2021. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there wasn't an 18% gap or a 20% gap in revenue for those organizations. So continuing the conversation around sustainability models for nonprofit organizations that are doing good work, how you can support those organizations. The other thing that is immediate that we've seen throughout the last year as we were developing this report is a need for more trust-based conversations. There's a movement within philanthropy around developing more trust-based practices. And really what those trust-based practices do is they minimize the rigor of the application process. It minimizes the rigor of reporting, moves more into conversational and interpersonal and relational discussion between grant makers and grantees, and thinking about those mechanisms to kind of shorten the long game that it may take in some cases. We had a funder in 2020 that had a legitimate 18-month application process from concept to funding of organizations. And in 2020, they retooled their process because they recognized that they need to shorten to be more reactive to the things that were happening in communities and engage in more conversation. And we're actually seeing that by way of conversation within the work that's happening among our members that they're doing in their spaces. And then the other piece of the work that I would absolutely implore as actionable work, and that is understand your community from an equity perspective, both racial and socioeconomic perspective. And think about the strategies and think about where you are as an organization and individuals as you're looking at racial equity issues or socioeconomic issues that are happening in your communities, and think about the approaches that you need to take as an organization to get mobilized around the understanding that you need to have so that you can be more actionable in that very dynamic and very immediate space that is in our community ongoing right now in the moment.
And a quick addition to that is many of those who have experience with the relief funds are now rethinking and exploring how those experiences can inform grant making practices moving forward.
Thank you, Tony, Michelle. It really is a direction that, Tim, we'll have to have some conversation on how to make grant making a little easier for our nonprofit partners and engage our donor advised fund holders even more in our grant making process, meeting the needs of the community.
Yeah, we have, we gave this presentation to the Community Foundation of Fox Cities right before the holidays. And they are about to engage in their strategic planning process that's taking place in 2021. And they were particularly interested in trust-based approaches as well as their racial equity platforms. And what I would encourage organizations to do based on what we're hearing is that don't necessarily wait for a strategic planning process. Think about your processes now and what that could potentially look like as you go forward. And WPN is also, we partner with the Whitman Institute, which is an organization out of the San Francisco Bay Area, and they've developed a curriculum around trust-based approaches to philanthropy. What I would tell you is that any good community foundation, and I know this to be fact, is already doing a lot of the trust-based approaches. They just haven't condensed it into a curriculum or a curriculum type information or into a 6-point plan around that work. A lot of good trust-based work is happening because you can't be in a community without building that trust. But the trust-based philanthropy approach and curriculum does look at specific ways to do that and calls out the areas that are of great work that's already happening and those areas that may need improvement.
Tony, thank you for that too. Oh, go ahead.
Tony, are you finding that private foundations are a little bit more open to that trust-based than community foundations?
So I would say that if we had to look at it by sector, community foundations are thinking about their trust-based approaches, but they are bigger foundations. I would also say corporate. There's alignment to kind of the overall corporate structure. So it doesn't always feel like there's a level of flexibility there with those organizations, although it is a ground game and a grassroots game. And if you have individuals within your organization that are adopting those approaches, there's room for change in the corporate sector. Relative to family foundations, I do think that there are a number of family foundations that are thinking about on the ground trust-based, trust-building approaches. Organizations like the Zilber Family Foundation in Milwaukee has really engaged some of these conversations around trust-based approaches and the work they're doing. Some family foundations are moving in that direction. One of the slides that is part of the overall report that we didn't go into today, but a number of family foundations are now looking at expanding their boards. There is succession planning that's happening within family foundations. They are now moving more towards younger individuals within the family, as well as opening the doors up and having non-family members serve on the board of directors of those actual foundations themselves. And so there is some changes that are happening within the family foundation. The other thing that family foundations are beginning to focus on a little bit more, they are becoming a little bit more strategic, and they're focusing on issues as opposed to just overall grant making overall. So they're looking at key issues that are of interest to family members and figure out how to source those issues within the communities that they're working in. So the short answer to the question is there's movement within family foundations, but family foundations still is steeped a lot in tradition. So it's a little bit of a heavier pull, but I think it's a pull that's worth making that I think a number of the family foundations are seeing themselves doing.
Thanks, Tony. I think, a lot of good questions too. And I think the beauty of what one of the many things WPN offers is that we're able to look at a lot of data. We're also able to look at a lot of the trending. So we're able to look backwards we're able to look at where we are now and really some planning for the future, which was beautiful for all of us. And I think that, kind of leads me more towards, I'm looking at Tim, as our CEO. And Tim, I just want to turn over to you now as well, because I know there's your vision for the future, and you may have some questions as well. So I'll turn it to you.
Sure. Maybe I'll build on what Tony had mentioned just a moment ago. I'm really excited to begin some intentional conversations across our community to understand our differences better and intentionally improve the community and its inclusiveness. And I think of it from a racial standpoint, socioeconomical standpoint, and maybe belief standpoint, maybe age standpoint. You can apply that in many ways. But if we look at the screen here today, we all kind of, well, with one exception, it looks like we all look the same. But I would ask each of you to look outside the window and then compare that to what you see on the screen. And I think there's a difference. And we need to become more intentional and more comfortable talking about differences in the community so that we make sure that we're addressing the real needs. We're all very fortunate to be able to have a Zoom connection and to be able to talk this way. But our work needs to, become once again more and more in person and intentionally reaching out to everyone in the community so that we can include them in making the North Central Wisconsin the best place for people to live and the best place for people to move to. So I'm eager for that discussion to begin. I think it has begun in pockets across the community, but I see us as a resource to be able to maybe pull that discussion together and lead that discussion and make some intentional change and improvement in how we include everyone in the community in what we're doing so that we're strategic about fixing the right problems and improving the right situations. And this can expand all the way to rural broadband, which is very inequitable for many people, maybe in our community, we have a large Hmong population that could use more and more support so that they can live a better life and that they can contribute to more of the success in our community. So those are some examples. I see that as our role, and I can see that as a difference maybe as we evolve and grow, is to be part of those discussions, which will impact how we design and administer scholarships, or how we revitalize the downtown community, or how we, if we look at the Community Partners Campus, a great effort that's going on there. How do we apply models like that and to meet other needs in the community? Maybe that type of an approach can be used in the arts and help our arts organizations be more efficient and reach more people and work together better to make it an even better community for visitors to come see. So I'm excited for us to be able to get off of Zoom. I'm excited for us to be able to really make 2021 a different year that will stand apart from last year, and that we'll be better off together than we were before 2020 started. So that's kind of my view on, as a newcomer in the community and seeing some opportunity for us to be better. We're all in situations where we've been able to do well in some way, and at the same time we need to be doing good with the things that we've benefited from in our ability to do well. So my little slogan is do well and do good at the same time. So it's our role to create those discussions, create some quick hit actions that can show that we can make a difference, and then create strategies in the long term that will make this the best place to live in America, which I think it probably is. We probably have some benchmarks that we can learn from in certain pockets. And I think Tony and Michelle, we'd look to you to maybe in certain areas, see what some other benchmark communities are with certain aspects, and see how we can learn from what other communities have done, pull it all together. We have you know, this is great. We have a call like this in a smaller community to be able to bring this many people onto a call. We have people interested. We have people who want to make a positive impact in a community, and we need to leverage that interest and turn it into some action.
Tim, I just want to say I was just excited listening to you talk about the areas of focus and the work that you want to do. Philanthropy throughout the state is engaging in more conversations about broadband. Our rural philanthropy group is engaging in that conversation, as we are engaging our own organization, WPN, in conversations about equity, both racial and socioeconomic, that are happening in our communities. We're engaging in that conversation. And what I would encourage you to do as you are moving forward, which was some of the best advice that I've got on my own racial equity journey in terms of leading this organization. And that is, it's important to come to the table understanding that organizations as well as individuals within those organizations are at very different stages in their own equity journey. And if we're acknowledging that, and if we're being authentic within that work and understanding that people are at very different places, then you have the ability to bring everyone together for good, fruitful conversations, that people don't feel like they can't be part of the conversation because maybe they haven't done the work or they're not far enough along. And so as you're engaging in those conversations, as you're bringing in your stakeholders together and developing those discussions, keep in mind that anyone can join those discussions because they have something to contribute and bring. And even if you don't feel like you're where you need to be, that's okay. Let's meet people where they are and help to build them up with those tools that we talked about in those conversations.
Thank you.
Sounds good. Well, I think, you know, we're coming close to the top of the hour. I want to just say thank you. And then I want to let Tim have some closing comments. Again, lots of great information that was covered today. I would encourage you, if you would like anything from us as far as that link, the publication, or some further conversation, we're more than happy to help with that. I think what you're going to continue to see is that the Community Foundation is, we're at the table. And sometimes we may be there leading and sometimes we may be there supporting. But we really do care. We care about the community. We care about all of you. And we're excited about what's coming ahead. And we're thankful to have all of you, but we're also thankful to have strong partners out there, just like WPN. So Tim, I turn to you just for some closing comments.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you to everyone for joining today. Hopefully this is just a beginning of some conversations, and that when we hang up from our Zoom call, that the conversation isn't stopped. So feel free to reach out to any of us at the foundation anytime. We're happy to connect you to people. We're happy to begin discussions. We're not afraid of any topic, and we will tell you what we don't know, and we'll tell you what we do know. So take advantage.
Maybe a little extra.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. But Tony and Michelle, thank you so much for taking the time today, and thank you for the report that you've put together. It is a tool that will help us with our direction and with some of our strategic actions that we'll be taking in the future. So we're proud to sponsor the Wisconsin Gives Report, and we're thankful to be able to be part of your organization. And thank you for producing such an informative piece. You know, every page looks clean and simple, but there's a lot of data behind it, and it's well documented, it's well researched, and well presented. So thank you so much. We're committed to creating solutions, improving lives, and ensuring our communities thrive even during challenging times. We've had a challenging past year. We're going to have challenges in future years, and I think COVID has taught us that we can be flexible and nimble, and that we need to be, and who knows in what area that will need to happen in the future. But this is, you know, as we see the bright sun rising for 2021, I think we have some new tools in our tool chest to be able to address potential challenges that come up. Once again, this is the beginning of a discussion. Let's keep it going. And I know Tony and Michelle are always available. We're always available. Thanks for joining us. and look forward to meeting you guys face to face. Only a few of you that I've actually been able to meet face to face, but some of you I have. Honestly, I'm tired of Zoom. We're going to keep doing Zoom even when life goes back to whatever the normal is going to be, because it is a good tool. But I tell you, it's nothing like being able to sit in a room and talk to you face to face. So let's look forward to that for 2021. And thanks for joining us today.
Great.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.